In 1883, the Englishwoman's Domestic Magazine prescribed, "The bride's toilette demands not less than 3 hours of uninterrupted attention and the assistance of no fewer than 4 attendants." The photographs show pristine white silk, untouched, floating. The reality was a garment that weighed 12 pounds before you stepped into it and absorbed every degree of body heat, every drop of sweat, every tremor of anxiety. That is the ratio this system produced. 6 layers, 3 hours of preparation for approximately 15 minutes at the altar. The first thing you need to understand about the bridal gown is that it was never intended to be comfortable. It was intended to be correct. The cost breakdown, recorded in household ledgers from 1881 to 1889, shows a middle-class bride spending between £10 and £25 on her ensemble. That sum represented 6 to 12 months of a housemaid's annual wages. The assumption built into every commission was single-use display. The dress would appear for the ceremony, perhaps the reception, then be stored or cut down for a younger sister. But the 1880s had almost no reliable method of cleaning silk at home. Professional cleaning cost nearly as much as the garment itself. Stains set permanently. Perspiration salts degraded fibers. Moth damage was constant. The dress was an archive of a single day's labor, pollution, and physiological stress. To understand what that meant, you need to picture what these 6 layers actually were. Layer 1, the chemise. Knee-length linen cut straight. Its function was not modesty but absorption. It intercepted body oils, sweat, and skin particles before they reached the outer layers. Linen absorbs moisture. In a room heated to 65 degrees Fahrenheit by coal fire, with 4 attendants moving in close proximity, the ambient humidity rose. Your skin produced approximately 1 litre of insensible perspiration over 3 hours. The chemise absorbed it. It could not be changed once dressing began. Layer 2, the corset. Cootie or satin exterior, 12 to 14 steel bones laced from the back. A reduction of 4 to 6 inches at the waist was standard. The lacing required 2 attendants, pulling in alternating increments. Your diaphragm compressed. Your rib cage shifted. Your breathing pattern changed from diaphragmatic to shallow thoracic intake. The corset did not simply shape the torso. It reconfigured respiratory mechanics. LEPS 3. The corset cover. Lightweight cotton, lightly boned at the seams. Its purpose was to prevent the steel bones of the corset from imprinting on the outer silk. Cotton retains heat. Layer 4, the petticoats. 2 or 3, depending on the desired silhouette. Starched cotton or horsehair braid. Each petticoat added approximately 1.5 pounds. They supported the bustle structure. They trapped air. They created a microclimate between your skin and the outer dress. Layer 5, the bustle framework. Wire and tape articulated at the hips. It created the posterior projection required by 1880s fashion. It shifted your center of gravity backward. It snagged on doorways, chair backs, carriage steps. If not secured precisely at the waist seam, it could shift during movement, distorting the silhouette and requiring partial redressing. Layer 6, the dress itself. Silk satin or file, hand-sewn seams, hooks and eyes along the back closure. The train measured 3.5 yards in length. The neckline sat low, exposing the upper chest and shoulders. The sleeves were long, tight at the wrist. Silk shows every mark. It tears under tension. The material properties of each layer compounded the physiological load. Linen absorbs, cotton retains, silk displays. The combination meant that every biological output, sweat, skin oils, respiratory moisture, was captured, held and made visible or structurally consequential. The dressing room, typically a bedroom shared with attendants, offered minimal ventilation. Gas lamps or candles produced heat and soot. Soot settled on silk. It could not be brushed off without damaging the weave. The temperature in the room might be 65 degrees. The temperature under the layers, after 90 minutes of dressing, approached 85 degrees. Your body produced heat at a rate of approximately 100 watts at rest. Under 6 layers, with restricted airflow, that heat accumulated. The structural failure points were predictable. The hooks at the back of the dress, under tension from corset compression, could pop open during movement. The bustle attachment, if not secured with exact tension, could shift, requiring the removal of the outer dress to reposition. The train hem dragged on floors, picking up dust, mud, debris. It could not be lifted while your hands were occupied holding a bouquet or adjusting a veil. The low neckline exposed skin to drafts, but adding a shawl violated etiquette for the ceremony portion. Each potential failure required intervention from an attendant. Each intervention risked disturbing another layer. The assumption built into every commission was that the dress would be worn once. Reuse was theoretically possible, dyed for evening wear, cut down for a child's dress, but the structural complexity made alteration difficult. The hand-sewn seams, the specialized boning, the train attachment points were not designed for modification. But the 1880s had almost no reliable method of maintaining silk garments between uses. Stains set, fibers degraded, moths fed. The dress was an archive of a single day's labor, pollution, and physiological stress. Which brings you to the body inside the layers, and the body is where the real problem begins. The corset's reduction of 4 to 6 inches demanded shallow thoracic breathing, which meant reduced oxygen intake. Bodies working hard produce sweat. Linen absorbs, cotton retains, silk displays. The combination of restricted breathing, prolonged standing, accumulating body heat, and sustained anxiety produced predictable physiological results. But before we address the body's response, we must complete the inventory of what encased it. Which brings you to the body inside the layers, and the body is where the real problem begins. The corset's reduction of 4 to 6 inches demanded shallow thoracic breathing, which meant reduced oxygen intake. Bodies working hard produce sweat. Linen absorbs, cotton retains, silk displays. The combination of restricted breathing, prolonged standing, accumulating body heat and sustained anxiety produced predictable physiological results. You stand on a low platform while 2 attendants pull the corset laces. They work in alternating increments. One pull, pause, one pull, pause. The steel bones press against your ribs. Your diaphragm cannot descend fully. Each breath draws approximately 300 milliliters of air instead of the normal 500. Your heart rate increases to compensate. The room temperature is 65 degrees. Under the layers, after 20 minutes of lacing, the microclimate reaches 78 degrees. Your skin produces insensible perspiration at a rate of approximately 30 milliliters per hour. The chemise absorbs it. The corset cover retains it. The silk outer layer displays any breakthrough as a darkened patch. The corset does not simply compress the waist. It redistributes internal organs. The stomach shifts downward. The intestines compress. The liver moves slightly. This redistribution creates pressure on the bladder. You feel the urge to urinate approximately every 45 minutes, but the dressing protocol does not permit removal of layers once begun. The chemise, corset, petticoats, bustle, and dress form a sealed system. To access the body's functions requires dismantling the entire structure. The etiquette manuals do not address this contingency. The attendants do not discuss it. You learn to suppress the signal. Your feet bear weight differently under the corset's altered posture. The center of gravity shifts forward. The spine curves into an S shape. The lumbar region experiences increased compression. Standing for 3 hours in this configuration produces muscle fatigue in the lower back, calves, and feet. The shoes are satin, low-heeled, sized to accommodate swollen feet, but not designed for prolonged standing. The arch support is minimal. The leather sole offers no cushioning. After 90 minutes, your feet ache. After 2 hours, the pain becomes a constant background signal. The temperature gradient between your skin and the outer silk creates condensation. Moisture migrates outward through the layers. The linen chemise becomes damp. The cotton corset cover retains that dampness. The silk outer layer, if the humidity is high enough, develops a slight sheen where moisture reaches the surface. In gaslit rooms, soot particles settle on damp silk. They adhere. They cannot be removed without professional cleaning. The dress accumulates evidence of its own wearing before the ceremony begins. Your arms remain at your sides during dressing. The sleeves of the dress are tight at the wrist, requiring careful maneuvering to slide your hands through. Once the sleeves are fastened, your range of motion is restricted. You cannot raise your arms above shoulder height without straining the seams. You cannot reach behind your back to adjust a hook. You cannot scratch an itch on your shoulder blade. Any adjustment requires an attendant. The dependency is structural, not incidental. The low neckline exposes your upper chest and shoulders to air currents. Drafts from windows or doors create localized cooling on exposed skin, but the layers beneath trap heat. The result is a patchwork of thermal sensations: cool on the collarbones, warm on the torso, hot at the waist where the corset compresses. Your nervous system receives conflicting signals. You experience neither comfort nor consistent discomfort. You experience a series of localized physiological events. The bustle framework adds weight and alters balance. It projects approximately 8 inches behind your hips. It catches on door frames, chair backs, carriage steps. If it shifts during movement, the entire silhouette distorts. Correcting a shifted bustle requires partial undressing, unhooking the dress, loosening the petticoats, repositioning the framework, then reassembling the layers. Each correction adds time. Each adjustment increases the risk of staining or tearing the silk. Your hands hold a bouquet. The flowers are fresh. They have weight. They have scent. They release moisture. Your grip must be firm enough to prevent dropping them, but relaxed enough to avoid crushing the stems. The bouquet becomes an extension of the dress's constraints, another object that limits movement, another source of potential failure. If a petal falls, it stains the silk. If the stems leak sap, they leave a mark. The bouquet is not decorative. It is logistical. The veil attaches to your hair with pins. The hair itself has been arranged for 3 hours prior to dressing. Pomade holds the style. The pomade has scent. It transfers to the veil. The veil is tulle or lace. It obscures vision slightly. It catches on the low neckline if you turn your head too quickly. It requires constant minor adjustments to maintain its position. Each adjustment risks dislodging a pin. A dislodged pin can tear silk or scratch skin. The combination of inadequate ventilation, restricted breathing, prolonged standing, accumulating body heat, and sustained anxiety produces predictable physiological results. Your pulse elevates, your palms sweat, your mouth dries. Your vision may blur slightly if you stand too long without shifting weight. These are not signs of emotional distress. They are mechanical outcomes of the system's design. The body responds to constraint with measurable physiological changes. The attendants monitor your appearance, not your comfort. They check the drape of the train, the alignment of the bustle, the placement of the veil. They do not ask about your breathing. They do not inquire about your feet. Their function is to maintain the visual standard, not to mitigate physiological stress. The etiquette manuals specify their duties: arranging layers, fastening hooks, adjusting trim. They do not specify monitoring for signs of fainting or respiratory distress. You learn to breathe in short, shallow increments. You learn to shift your weight subtly from one foot to the other without disturbing the silhouette. You learn to suppress the urge to scratch, to adjust, to sigh. The training is not formal. It is absorbed through the dressing process itself. Each minor discomfort becomes a data point. Each successful suppression becomes a skill. The 3-hour preparation window is not arbitrary. It is the minimum time required to assemble 6 layers on a body that has been corseted, coiffed, and positioned according to protocol. Shorter preparation risks improper alignment. Longer preparation increases physiological strain. The window represents a compromise between visual correctness and bodily endurance. It is not designed for comfort. It is designed for correctness. Remember the ratio: 6 layers, 3 hours of preparation for approximately 15 minutes at the altar. The body's response to that ratio is not emotional. It is mechanical. Sweat accumulates. Breath shortens, muscles fatigue. The layers absorb, retain, display. The system operates as designed. The Lord Chamberlain's office had an opinion about bridal processions. In 1882, the Book of Etiquette for Young Ladies specified, the bride must be accompanied to the altar by her father, or in his absence by the nearest male relative of equal or superior social standing. No exception is permitted for considerations of personal preference. The phrasing, "no exception is permitted," was not decorative. It meant exactly what it said. A bride who arrived with an unauthorized escort risked the ceremony's social validity. The congregation would note the deviation. The parish register might include a marginal comment. The family's standing within local networks could suffer measurable diminishment. The bureaucratic machinery of Victorian marriage extended. In other words, all the way down to the question of which hand rested on which arm during the final 12 paces to the altar. But the regulations governing movement began much earlier. 3 weeks before the ceremony, your father or guardian submitted a notice of intended marriage to the parish registrar. The form required exact names, addresses, occupations, and the signatures of 2 witnesses. It specified the date, time, and location of the ceremony. It included a declaration that no legal impediment existed. The form cost 2 shillings and 6 pence. It could not be amended after submission without incurring an additional fee and a 7-day delay. Chaperone surveillance operated on a precise schedule. From the moment dressing began, at least 2 married women of approved social standing remained in the room. Their function was not companionship but verification. They observed the application of each layer. They confirmed the correct sequence of hooks, the proper tension of laces, the appropriate drape of the train. The Young Bride's Guide, 1885, stated it. The presence of matrons during the toilette ensures that no impropriety of arrangement escapes notice. The matrons did not assist with physical tasks unless requested. They watched. They recorded mental notes. Their testimony could later confirm that the bride had been properly attired, properly accompanied, properly presented. The timing of departure from the residence was calculated to the minute. Carriages were booked through a livery service. The contract specified arrival time, route and fare. A delay of more than 5 minutes incurred a penalty clause. The route avoided known rough pavement, construction zones and areas with high pedestrian traffic. The carriage interior was lined with clean linen to protect the dress from dust. The windows remained closed to prevent soot infiltration. The driver received written instructions regarding speed. Proceed at a walk through congested areas. Trot only on clear thoroughfares. Jostling could displace the bustle. Sudden stops could tear the train. The church booking required separate documentation. The vestry clerk recorded the ceremony time in a ledger that coordinated multiple weddings per day. A typical Saturday might schedule ceremonies at 11, 12:30 and 2 o'clock. Each ceremony received a 30-minute window. The window included procession, exchange, signing and recession. If the preceding ceremony ran long, your party waited in the vestry. The vestry offered minimal seating, no ventilation and shared use of the signing table. Your train dragged on stone floors that had absorbed decades of foot traffic, candle wax and floral debris. The air smelled of damp wool, old wood, and extinguished tapers. The signing protocol demanded exact compliance. The register book lay open on a lectern. You signed with a provided pen, using ink that could smudge if applied too heavily. Your signature had to match the name on the notice of intended marriage. A discrepancy required correction by the registrar, which added time and attracted attention. The witnesses signed immediately after. Their signatures confirmed not only the event but the correctness of its execution. The register entry became a permanent record. Errors could not be erased. They could only be struck through and initialed, creating a visible mark of deviation. The etiquette manual specified behavior during the ceremony itself. The Complete Guide to Marriage Ceremonies, 1887, instructed. The bride maintains a downward gaze during the vows, neither looking at the congregation nor raising her eyes above the officiant's shoulder. Her responses are spoken in a clear but moderate tone, neither whispering nor projecting. The phrasing "neither whispering nor projecting" was not advisory. It defined the acceptable acoustic range. A voice too soft suggested uncertainty. A voice too loud suggested immodesty. Both readings carried social consequences. The management of the train during the ceremony required coordinated action. As you approached the altar rail, an attendant, typically a bridesmaid or younger sister, fanned the train behind you in a precise arc. The arc measured approximately 18 inches on either side of your path. Too narrow, and the train bunched, creating wrinkles visible in photographs. Too wide, and it encroached on the space of the groom or officiant, requiring corrective movement. The attendant practiced this motion during rehearsal. The rehearsal itself was a separate bureaucratic event, requiring coordination of all participants, booking of the church space, and payment of the verger's fee. The bouquet management followed similar protocol. You held it at waist level, stems angled slightly downward to prevent sap contact with the dress. During the ring exchange, you transferred it to your left hand, freeing your right for the ring placement. The transfer had to be smooth, without visible adjustment. Any fumbling attracted notice. The flowers themselves were selected not only for appearance but for durability. Orange blossom wilted quickly under gaslight heat. Roses held better but dropped petals. Each variety carried symbolic meaning that had to align with family expectations and social messaging. The consequence of non-compliance with any of these regulations was not legal penalty, but social documentation. A deviation noted by a matron, recorded by a parish clerk, or observed by a congregant became part of the event's permanent record. Gossip networks transmitted these observations. Marriage prospects for younger siblings could be affected. Business relationships tied to family standing could shift. The system enforced correctness not through law but through reputation management. The paperwork extended beyond the ceremony. Within 24 hours, the signed register was copied into the parish's master ledger. A certificate was issued for a fee of 1 shilling. This certificate was required for legal recognition of the marriage, for property transfers, for name changes on official documents. Errors in the certificate required a formal correction process involving the Registrar General, additional fees, and a waiting period of up to 14 days. During that period, the marriage's legal status remained technically provisional. The chaperone surveillance did not end with the ceremony. The matrons accompanied you to the reception, monitored your interactions with guests, ensured that no unauthorized conversations occurred, and verified that your departure for the honeymoon followed the approved schedule and route. Their final report, often verbal but sometimes written, confirmed that the entire process had been executed according to protocol. This report entered family archives, referenced in future negotiations, cited in disputes over inheritance or social standing. The bureaucratic machinery of Victorian marriage extended, in other words, all the way down to the question of which finger received the ring, at what angle, with what pressure. None of it had been designed with comfort as a relevant consideration. The system operated to produce verifiable correctness, documented compliance, and socially legible outcomes. Your body, your dress, your movements were instruments in that production. Remember the ratio: 6 layers, 3 hours of preparation for approximately 15 minutes at the altar. But the 15 minutes at the altar represented only the visible portion of a much longer sequence of regulated actions. The paperwork, the chaperones, the timing, the protocols. Each element added layers of constraint that compounded the physiological load. The body responded to that compound constraint with measurable outputs: sweat, fatigue, restricted breath. The system recorded those outputs not as problems to be solved, but as evidence of proper endurance. The carriage queue began 3 blocks from the church. This was not spontaneous congestion. It was scheduled infrastructure. Livery contracts specified staggered arrival times to prevent bottlenecking at the church steps. Your carriage waited while the preceding party completed their recession. The wait lasted approximately 8 minutes. During that time, you remained seated, train fanned across the carriage floor, bouquet resting on your lap. The carriage interior measured 42 inches in width. Your dress, with bustle and train, occupied 38 of those inches. The remaining 4 inches accommodated your father's formal coat. Any shift in position risked crushing silk or dislodging the bustle framework. The carriage itself presented material challenges. The upholstery was horsehair or velvet. Both materials snagged on silk hooks or lace trim. The windows remained closed to exclude soot and dust. This trapped body heat and the scent of pomade, orange blossom and damp linen. The temperature inside rose approximately 3 degrees above ambient. Your skin, already producing insensible perspiration under 6 layers, now operated in a microclimate of elevated humidity. Condensation formed on the interior glass. It did not drip. It migrated downward in slow rivulets, leaving mineral deposits when it evaporated. The route avoided known rough pavement, but cobblestone vibration transmitted through the carriage suspension. Each jolt transferred energy to your body. The corset's steel bones pressed against ribs with increased force. The bustle framework shifted minutely against its attachments. The train fanned across the floor, experienced shear forces that could create permanent creases. The driver maintained a walk pace through congested areas as instructed. This reduced jostling but extended transit time. The 8-minute wait plus 4 minutes of transit meant 12 minutes of constrained immobility after 3 hours of dressing. Arrival at the church introduced architectural constraints. The main entrance measured 36 inches in width. Your dress with bustle projection measured 34 inches at its widest point. The 2-inch margin required precise alignment. An attendant exited first to hold the door. You descended the carriage step with your father's assistance. The step height was 7 inches. Your satin shoes offered minimal traction. The silk train dragged on the carriage step, then on the pavement, then on the church's stone threshold. Each surface transferred particulate matter to the hem. Carriage dust, street mud, church grit. The hem could not be lifted while your hands managed bouquet and balance. The church interior presented a different sensory environment. The temperature dropped approximately 10 degrees from the carriage interior. Stone walls retained cold. Drafts moved through the nave from poorly sealed windows. Your exposed collarbones and shoulders experienced immediate cooling, but the layers beneath retained body heat. The result was a thermal gradient. Cool skin surface, warm microclimate under silk. This gradient promoted condensation within the fabric layers. Moisture migrated outward. The linen chemise became damp. The cotton corset cover retained that dampness. The silk outer layer developed a slight sheen where moisture reached the surface. The procession down the aisle covered approximately 60 feet. The protocol specified a pace of 1 step per 2 seconds. This pace allowed the train to flow without bunching and gave the congregation time to observe the silhouette. Your father's arm provided stability, but the corset's restricted breathing meant each step required conscious coordination. Inhale on the left foot, exhale on the right. The bouquet remained at waist level. The veil obscured peripheral vision. You focused on the officiant's position at the altar rail, approximately 40 feet ahead. The congregation's presence created acoustic and spatial pressure. Their attention was not passive, it was evaluative. Eyes tracked the train's drape, the bustle's alignment, the veil's position. Any deviation from expected presentation generated observable reaction. A head tilt, a whispered comment, a note taken. The social machinery operated through this surveillance. Correctness was not self-evident. It required public verification. At the altar rail, the attendant fanned your train in the prescribed 18-inch arc. The motion required practice. Too narrow and the train bunched, creating wrinkles visible in photographs. Too wide and it encroached on the groom's space, requiring corrective movement. The arc maintained the silhouette's integrity while allowing you to kneel. The kneeler was padded but hard. Your knees, already fatigued from 3 hours of standing, now bore weight on a surface that offered minimal cushioning. The corset's compression made rising from the kneeler a coordinated effort. Shift weight forward. Use father's arm for leverage. Rise in one smooth motion to avoid disturbing layers. The vow exchange lasted approximately 90 seconds. Your responses followed the prescribed text. I take thee, spoken in a clear but moderate tone. The acoustic environment of the church amplified sound but also created reverberation. Your voice returned to you slightly delayed, slightly altered. This required conscious modulation to maintain the acceptable range, neither whispering nor projecting. The ring exchange required precise motor control. Your right hand, restricted by the tight sleeve wrist, received the ring. You placed it on the groom's finger with a motion practiced during rehearsal. The ring's metal was cool against your skin. The pressure of placement had to be firm enough to seat the ring, but gentle enough to avoid visible struggle. The entire interaction at the altar, the vows, the ring exchange, the pronouncement, lasted approximately 30 seconds of active participation. Pause 1.5 seconds, the ratio remains. 6 layers, 3 hours of preparation for approximately 15 minutes at the altar, of which 30 seconds constituted the core transaction. The body's physiological state during those 30 seconds was not incidental. Restricted breathing, accumulated fatigue, thermal stress, and sustained anxiety produced measurable outputs. Elevated pulse, shallow respiration, muscle tension. These outputs were not signs of emotional distress. They were mechanical outcomes of the system's design. The register signing followed immediately. You moved to the lectern, train managed by an attendant. The pen provided was metal-nibbed, requiring moderate pressure to deposit ink. Your signature had to match the notice of intended marriage. The ink could smudge if applied too heavily, or if your hand trembled from fatigue. The paper absorbed moisture from the air and from previous signatures. Your signature entered a permanent record. Errors could not be erased. They could only be struck through and initialed, creating a visible mark of deviation. The recession reversed the procession's logistics. You exited the altar rail, train refanned, and walked the 60 feet back up the aisle. The congregation's attention now evaluated the completed presentation. Was the train still properly draped? Had the bustle maintained its position? Did the veil remain correctly placed? Any deviation noted during the recession carried the same social weight as deviations during the approach. The carriage queue awaited, the cycle repeated, wait, transit, architectural navigation, constrained immobility. The logistical reality of the procession and ceremony was not decorative. It was structural. Each element, queue timing, route planning, architectural margins, acoustic protocols, motor control requirements, added layers of constraint that compounded the physiological load. The body responded to that compound constraint with measurable outputs. The system recorded those outputs not as problems to be solved, but as evidence of proper endurance. Remember the ratio: 6 layers, 3 hours of preparation for approximately 15 minutes at the altar. The procession and ceremony represented the visible portion of that ratio. But the visibility was not the point. The point was verifiable correctness, documented compliance, and socially legible outcomes. Your body, your dress, your movements were instruments in that production. The transaction began before the first hook was fastened. The marriage settlement, drafted by solicitors and signed 3 weeks prior, specified the dowry amount, property transfers, and income expectations. For a middle-class bride in 1885, the typical settlement ranged from £500 to £2,000. That sum represented capital, not income. It transferred from the bride's family to the groom's control upon registration of the marriage. The dress you wore during the ceremony cost between £10 and £25. That cost was not an investment. It was a performance fee. The settlement's terms dictated the dress's afterlife, stored intact for potential reuse by a younger sister, cut down for evening wear, or disassembled for fabric salvage. The decision was economic, not sentimental. The removal process after the ceremony reversed the dressing sequence, but not its physiological toll. In the vestry or a designated retiring room, attendants unhooked the dress, loosened the bustle attachments, and unlaced the corset. Each layer released accumulated heat, moisture, and tension. The chemise, damp with insensible perspiration, adhered to skin. Peeling it away required careful maneuvering to avoid tearing delicate seams. The corset, once unlaced, did not immediately restore normal breathing. Your rib cage, compressed for 4 to 5 hours, required approximately 20 minutes to return to its natural expansion pattern. During that interval, your breathing remained shallow, your pulse elevated. The body's recovery was not instantaneous. It was mechanical, gradual, undocumented. The dress, once removed, entered a new phase of material management. Silk stains set within hours. Perspiration salts degraded fibers if not treated. The standard protocol involved hanging the dress in a well-ventilated area away from direct sunlight, brushing the surface with a soft bristle brush to remove particulate matter, and storing it in a cotton garment bag with lavender sachets to deter moths. Professional cleaning cost nearly as much as the garment itself, and risked damaging delicate trim or altering the silk's hand. Most families opted for home maintenance. The dress accumulated evidence of its single day's use: a faint watermark at the waistline from corset compression, a slight discoloration at the hem from pavement contact, a permanent crease where the bustle framework attached. These marks were not defects. They were records. The repurposing decision followed a cost-benefit analysis. A dress stored intact for a younger sister's use required climate-controlled storage, periodic airing, and moth prevention. The cost of that maintenance had to be weighed against the probability of reuse. A dress cut down for evening wear required a skilled seamstress, new trim and alterations to accommodate different undergarments. The labor cost often exceeded the value of the salvaged fabric. A dress disassembled for fabric salvage yielded approximately 3 yards of usable silk, worth approximately £1 per yard on the second-hand market. The structural components, bones, hooks, bustle framework, had negligible resale value. They were discarded. The class reproduction mechanics operated through these material decisions. The dress's afterlife reflected the family's economic position. Wealthy families stored dresses intact, displaying continuity across generations. Middle-class families cut down dresses for reuse, demonstrating resource management. Working-class families, when they participated in formal marriage ceremonies at all, often rented attire or borrowed from kin networks. The bridal gown was not simply clothing. It was a capital asset, a status marker, and a pedagogical tool. Younger sisters observed the maintenance protocol, learned the repurposing calculations, internalized the economic logic. The system reproduced itself through material practice, not ideological instruction. The silent post-ceremony reality involved physiological recovery that etiquette manuals did not address. After the dress removal, you changed into a traveling suit for the honeymoon departure. The suit was less restrictive, but still required proper undergarments. Your body, fatigued from hours of constraint, now faced the demands of transit, carriage or train travel to the honeymoon destination. The journey lasted several hours. You sat in confined spaces, managing residual discomfort from corset compression, foot fatigue, and thermal stress. The attendants who had assisted with dressing did not accompany you on the journey. Their contractual obligation ended with the ceremony's conclusion. You travelled with your new husband, a person whose daily habits, expectations, and physical presence were now your primary constraint. The social function of the bridal preparation system was not to facilitate a joyful transition. It was to produce verifiable correctness, documented compliance, and socially legible outcomes. The 6 layers, the 3-hour preparation, the regulated movement, the public performance. Each element served to demonstrate the family's capacity to marshal resources, coordinate labor, and enforce protocol. The bride's body was the medium through which that demonstration occurred. Her endurance of physiological stress was not a bug in the system. It was a feature. It proved the family's commitment to social norms, their willingness to invest capital in performance, their ability to subordinate individual comfort to collective reputation. Who benefited from this system? The livery services that provided carriages, the dressmakers and milliners who constructed the ensemble, the parish registrars who processed paperwork, the chaperones whose social capital increased through verification duties, the groom's family, who received capital through the settlement, the broader kinship network, which gained a new alliance documented through correct execution. The system persisted because it served multiple stakeholders simultaneously. It converted physiological endurance into social currency. It transformed material expenditure into reputational capital. It made the invisible labor of maintenance, coordination, and surveillance visible through the spectacle of the ceremony. The dress remembered everything. The damp patch at the waistline recorded the corset's compression. The slight discoloration at the hem documented the pavement's grit. The permanent crease at the bustle attachment marked the framework's pressure. The silk surface retained soot particles from the gaslit dressing room, pollen from the bouquet, mineral deposits from condensation on carriage windows. These were not flaws, they were archives. The dress was a physical record of a single day's labor, pollution, and physiological stress. It did not romanticize. It did not moralize. It documented. You are 22 years old. You have spent 3 hours assembling 6 layers on a body that compresses, heats, and fatigues under their weight. You have stood, walked, knelt, and signed for approximately 15 minutes of visible performance. All of it for a transaction that transferred capital, altered legal status, and repositioned you within social networks. The system called it a wedding. The household ledger called it an expenditure. The dress remembered everything. If you want to know what came next, the honeymoon transit, the establishment of a new household, the management of marital expectations, that is a different ratio, a different set of layers, a different archive of endurance.